Dr. Pollack, your commentary there is interesting to me because there is this phenomenon. This morning, the New York Times discusses it, the increasing strident nature of the regime against the United States. So I'll just read the story from the New York Times. The chants of death to America and the burning of American flags on the streets are as familiar a part of life here as air pollution and traffic jams. With the United States and Iran on the verge of a potentially historic nuclear accord, there has been a distinct change in tone, however. The anti-Americanism is getting even more strident. The rising levels of vitriol have been on display this week in the buildup to the annual anti-Israel extravaganza coming this Friday. So the other part of this is that as we reach out to extend that olive branch, to quote the Secretary of State's words, you have this reaction in Iran where the Ayatollah speaks even more fervently of the requirement, to develop, to mass produce, in his words, ICBMs. And this is the aspect of this where I think we're a little disconnected from the reality of the way in which that system works and the individual who makes the decisions over there. As a matter of fact, Rouhani today is meeting with Putin in Moscow. And what is the Russian demand? And this caught us by surprise this week. The demand from Iran now that we lift the arms embargo. And of course, they'll be getting this huge tranche. I've called it a signing bonus, but they'll be getting this cash on the barrelhead. And I think Russia is very, very interested in that because you see the stories in the last few weeks about the Russians selling weapon systems to Iran, including, surface to air, which frankly would allow them maybe to cheat with impunity if they put up a vast enough system across Iran. And now here's the new demand: lift the arms embargo. Dr. Pollack, your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with you. I saw Tom Eberbrink's piece this morning as well, and I think that it does speak to exactly the issue that I've been concerned about for quite some time, which is that we don't know how the Iranians are going to react to their own deal. And as I suggested, while I think it's clear that President Rouhani and Foreign Minister Zarif would like to move in the direction of accommodation, there are forces pushing in the opposite direction. And what we have seen from the Ayatollah himself is he is deeply suspicious of the United States, and he may very well decide that he needs to tack back to the right to accommodate his hardliners, because he just gave this big bone to Rouhani and the moderates in signing the agreement itself. I think this is a very real concern.
Well, the only caveat I would make is when we're talking about Zarif, remember, we're talking about a man who placed a wreath, on the grave of the individual who carried out or masterminded the attack on the Marine Corps barracks in Lebanon. He may seem moderate compared to the Ayatollah, but in terms of what he's called for and his past history running the security state, and the torture and execution of people as a consequence, it puts it in a little bit different perspective in terms of the background of some of these individuals. But I wanted to ask Mr. Rademacher, as you note in your testimony, Iran has agreed to not enrich uranium over 3.67% for at least 15 years. So implicit in that statement is that after 15 years, Iran's going to be permitted to enrich to higher levels. There is no suggestion that there will be any limit on the level to which Iran may enrich after 10 or 15 years, or the amount of highly enriched material that it may accumulate. So let's say Iran begins to enrich uranium very close to bomb-grade levels, after the sunset, and they say it's to operate a submarine program. What is the world's response to that? I mean, do I understand correctly the way this is teed up here?
Yeah, you're clearly grasping the point I made in my testimony, which is this agreement will concede to Iran the right after 15 years to produce highly enriched uranium, bomb-grade material, without any limitation on the amount of that material they may accumulate. Now, ordinarily you'd think if somebody's producing bomb-grade material in amounts in excess of what you'd need to build 1 or 2 or 3 nuclear bombs, that they must be on track to build a nuclear bomb. But you know, there are peaceful explanations one could put forward. One such explanation would be if they were to say, for example, we want to build a nuclear navy because, hey, you Americans, you have a nuclear navy and you use highly enriched uranium to fuel the nuclear reactors in your submarines. That's what we're doing. Now, if the Iranians say that, are the people in this room going to believe them? Are we going to think that that's really what they're doing? Or are we going to suspect that what they're really doing is accumulating the material so they can break out overnight and with a large arsenal of nuclear weapons? Personally, I'm going to think it's a pretext. But your question, Mr. Chairman, is what's the rest of the world going to think?
Well, the other point I would make,
and you know, I think a lot of the rest of the world is going to be prepared to give them the benefit of the doubt, and they will point to this agreement and say, hey, you Americans, too late for you to object. You signed off on this.
well, even the North Korean agreement did not have a sunset.
Correct.
Now, it had the loopholes in it because we couldn't go anytime, anywhere, you know, any place with the international inspectors. It was only a matter of time before North Korea would figure out a way to cheat on that agreement and get a bomb. But at least it didn't have a sunset. I mean, that's the aspect of this I don't understand. And the last point I would just ask Dr. Doran, you know, the administration says that they don't see, they're going to spend the vast majority of the money when we lift the sanctions. Most of it's going to go to butter, not to guns. However, the statement I saw was the statement by Iran that they were going to help. This was in the Wall Street Journal. They reported that Iran was going to help rebuild the tunnels. Mr. Engel and I were in one of those tunnels. There's 35 tunnels. They're expensive to build for Hamas, you know, under Israel, and that they were going to supply missiles to replace the inventory that were fired off by Hamas. And then the added story the next day that they were also going to fund precision-guided rockets and missiles, 100,000 of them, to Hezbollah. Now, that takes a little bit of cash to do that. How do we know that it's all going to go to butter and not to guns? I would just ask Mr. Doran, Dr. Doran, what's your calculus on that?
I think to believe this claim that it's going to go to butter, not guns, is to discount everything that the Iranians have said and done over the last 36 years. And I can't think of any other endeavor of human prediction where we would say everything that they did until yesterday has no relevance to what we think they're going to do. They're going to do tomorrow. In addition to the concerns that you raise, personally, I'm also very concerned about the ability of the Iranians to prop up the Assad regime. It wasn't that long ago that we thought the Assad regime might be toppled, and the greatest factor that changed the balance of power on the ground in favor of the Assad regime, or that gave it a new lease on life, was the Iranian intervention, direct intervention from Iranians themselves, and also the sending of Iraqi militias trained in Iran.
I'm glad you brought up that point, because not only was the Assad regime on the ropes, but the Iranian regime was on the ropes. And Mr. Engel and I had legislation based on some of the work of Stuart Levy over at Treasury to give the Ayatollah an actual choice between economic collapse or real compromise on his nuclear program. It passed out of here unanimously in this committee, passed the floor 400 to 20. One of the reasons Iran's a little bit back in the game is because we've partially lifted those sanctions. The suggestion in the House was that we double down and give us some real leverage in this negotiation, and the administration made the decision to sit on that legislation, or at least, you know, orchestrated in the Senate the inability to bring that to the floor. And I think we lost a lot of leverage out of that. My time's expired. I need to go to Mr. Engel. Thank you.